Hi, my name is Andrea Schmitz, and I'm a motion graphics designer and animator. This is me. I was every Disney princess. I used to wear costumes like every day, never mind what time of year it was. I grew up in Little Rock, Arkansas. My house is actually just out of frame up a street next to that one there. Um, it's pretty isolated, even though it's the capital city of the state. Um, I went to the same private school from kindergarten to 12th grade, so and it had like John's school, it had an emphasis on sports and not so much on art. So I was pretty much on my own as far as creative interests went. I've always been a writer. I could draw, but I was always a writer. I was never an artist in my own mind. Um, this is some early work. Um, but I grew up in a really great time for animation. There was Cartoon Network and Cartoon Fridays, the Disney Golden Age, and there was Toonami. So depending on when I got home from school, I could watch certain shows. Like Sailor Moon was too early, but I would get home during the Dragon Ball Z block, and then I would just take it from there through whatever seasonal show they had. It was also a great time for young adult fiction. I read Harry Potter over and over again. I think I got into it right before the third book came out, and I just kept reading it. And that got me into writing fan fiction, which had me writing awful, sappy stories that are available for viewing on the internet. But doing that and getting so into writing fan fiction and just like trying to make it better, because we would get bad reviews and they were not kind, and I just got better and better throughout middle school at writing using other people's characters. And it got to the point that when I started looking at colleges and high school, I was looking to go for creative writing, but I was very scared about job prospects after the fact. I didn't like journalism, and I didn't like writing nonfiction, and like writing academic papers was never the greatest for me. It was only fiction, so I knew that choosing to be only a writer would be hard. And around this time, I was watching the Lord of the Rings extended features on loop, and I saw how much fun everybody was having on the film sets, and I thought, oh, they're having so much fun, that looks nice. You know what would be great? Making films. They pay, right? That's a real job. That's realer than being a writer. I think it's writer and then film. So I applied to 5 schools for creative writing and 1 for film, and that's where I ended up going. I went to Northwestern University, which was freezing. And everybody liked to film outside. It was a very cold decision. And when I got there, I figured out I knew absolutely nothing about filmmaking. I didn't know what cinematography was. I didn't know lights were involved in filmmaking. Apparently, they're a big deal. And then as a freshman, it was basically 9 hours of waiting around on set and waiting to be useful or carry heavy things while other people made their creative decisions and took their sweet time doing it. So after spending 45 minutes on a light on a beach because they did not have enough sandbags, I decided that I would not work on sets anymore and that I would try to find other things within film that I could do indoors, which narrowed it down to sound design and animation. There was one animation class at Northwestern, and it emphasized the program After Effects. So that's how I made my first animation. It's the story of a fish with a dream. And for my first animation, I didn't want to do a walk cycle, so I made them all fish, because I can just have them float. So I used something called time remapping for their fins, which is I drew all of the layers of the motion of their fin in Photoshop along with their body, and I made it its own thing in After Effects, and I could keyframe which fin it was on. And I've used that many times since. Everything was made in Photoshop, and I composited, animated it all in After Effects. And I composed the music for it for a different class about sound design, so killed two birds with one stone. So after this, I got some work doing opening credits for several serial live action projects that other film students were doing. This was one about a baking superhero. So I took the process of baking and I incorporated everybody's names into it who were involved with the project. They gave me the title card and I storyboarded, pitched to the director who didn't really have an opinion, and then I designed and animated the whole thing. It was influenced by the Incredibles end credits, or the in credits. And then after that, I got another serial project at Northwestern about a detective. For this one, they gave me the character file because the director also knew art a little, and the title card. So I pitched the storyboard for the story progression, basically, and animated that. These were both done in Photoshop and After Effects. After this, I got infographic work from the animation teacher at Northwestern, and he had a grant to make a series of infographics explaining government programs to the layman. So I did one about the Affordable Care Act, which is the blue, and the deficit debt, which is the green. And these were my first bigger projects in After Effects. These were both about 3 minutes long. They gave me a script and a sound file that did not exactly match the script, so I had to go fix things. And I had free reign over the design and the animation and storyboard. I just had to run it by him. He would say, great, and then I would go ahead with it. I did all of the Affordable Care Act in Photoshop and animated in After Effects, and I used Illustrator for the deficit debt because I found out that if you make everything in vector, it doesn't pixelate if you have to zoom in or make it bigger or smaller, which was new for me. So after these projects, I was in my senior year at Northwestern and started to panic about jobs again, and thought, oh, I don't have a job yet, I don't have enough experience or savvy to make it as a motion graphics artist. I'll go to grad school. So I applied to the visual narrative program 3 weeks before it started and came to New York. So I came to art school to get yelled at until I got better, and that happened pretty quickly. I got slammed for this, especially because, or particularly because of the eyes on the girl and the line quality and how sketchy it was. The taxi was fine, everything else had to go. So I tried redrawing all class after a very lengthy slamming on that. And I redrew her like 4 times and showed the teacher after, and he said, no, you're still wrong, and I didn't know what to do. So for a long time, I just tried not to draw eyes. And tried to do a little more studying on that and figure out another way. As for the line quality, I started doing this thing where I would do the sketchy lines that I was used to in order to get the shape that I wanted, and then I would color them in afterwards so nobody would know that I had drawn more than one line. And so during that process, I came up with the aesthetic for my first final project in this program, The Boiling Point. It was for the narrative object narrative project, which involved, we were assigned a color, ours was red, as a narrative device, and we all had an object, we were all given an object we had to incorporate into the story of our pre-imagined character that we had developed throughout the summer. And I got a rubber lobster, and lobster rhymes with mobster, so I made this animation about a very tense standoff between my character and a mob boss over a boiling undersea volcano. It was very light and funny, but not really. I wanted to do kind of a soft motion animation, because it had to be 5 minutes long, and I had about 3 days. So I had seen Disney's Telltale Heart, narrated by James Mason, which is a very calm, slow. They do a lot with lighting and soft motion, fade in, fade out. So I wanted to do something like that with a first-person narration running over it, narrated by Walter. After this project, I wanted to continue using that style and maybe make it my style because I was trying to be an artist now, or just trying to be an artist to pay, and then but I was still a writer. So I tried different mediums, and I did this project to illustrate The Raven. We had to illustrate something already in existence. And I tried to push the angles and keep the architectural faces going, but at the same time, I had a job creating graphics for standardized tests in Illustrator, which was requiring me to learn Illustrator pretty deeply, pretty fast. So I did a few vector portraits of my friend just to practice and see how that went. So the combination of these two things led to The Burglar. The Cat Burglar is an animation I did for the digital short story project last year in After Effects using Illustrator elements. It's the story of a lonely burglar and his quest for love. I animated him using a plugin called Doic, which creates inverse kinematics for 2D puppet characters in After Effects, which means that I built him on different layers in Illustrator and brought him into After Effects. So his hand, his forearm, and his arm were all different, but the inverse kinematics would make it so if I moved his hand, his entire arm would move, which made animating him a lot easier, but it also made his movement pretty stiff at times. I made the color palette by taking inspirational pictures of the kind of landscape I was trying to mimic, and I stuck pretty closely to that, which I hadn't done before really in projects. I was pretty two-tone, or I would pick a color and go with it. I took sketches I had done of the burglar and traced them in Illustrator and made him a vector puppet. That's an example of the time remapping I used for his scarf. I had several different positions, and I would do the same thing I did with the fish, the flying fish fins, and go between those. I did the same for blinking. I had his closed eyes over his half eye over his regular eye in this puppet. After working on this project, I wanted to do the undergraduate animation major project I never got to do to prove myself as an animator and make a thesis film, only I wanted a little more control over the animation to make it a little less stiff than the burglar had been. So I decided to do a hand-drawn animation in Toon Boom Harmony, which brings me to Door, my thesis. It is about 9.5 minutes of animation, not counting the credits, I think. It's the story of Gaia, a grumpy teenager who moves into a new house with her mother, only to find out that it is haunted by an evil green door that wants to trap her in its world. This is Gaia, and this is her mother. I actually had a very epic, crazy story planned that bordered on time travel, but not quite, and then decided it was too big for this project and rewrote the entire thing in January, from which point I had to do a new script, storyboard the entire project, and then started going through the animation steps in Toon Boom. This is the final. I would rough out the characters' movements in kind of sketchy, the same line quality as before to get the shape. I would then outline them and lip sync if there was dialogue, and then color everything. And they have a shading program that's kind of like a bevel. So I would do that in Toon Boom, export the entire thing as an image sequence into After Effects, and then composite in there, make lighting effects, visual effects. I added the Photoshop backgrounds that I had made on the side and the individual elements like the door there and all of its moving. That's also time remapped. And I had about 180 shots. So this was the process for each one of those. And I have a clip.
Gaia, it is not a shack. It's an apartment. more like a nest.
You know, it wouldn't kill you to try and have more of a positive attitude.
The walls are moldy.
That's just the color the walls were before they were painted white. I think you mean gray. Really, Gaia? You're still scared of spiders? You're almost 16.
I'm not scared. It surprised me.
Great. Then you can throw it out.
But you're closer to the door.
We just got here, Gaia. Give this place a chance. I think it'll be good for us.
Because we're off to such a great start.
Gaia's story is about facing your fears. She goes from being overwhelmed by an unfamiliar situation to facing her demons and fighting her fears, though it does not mean that she's any less scared. I always felt like I had to learn as much as possible because I was scared of what might happen if I wasn't good enough. I jumped from writing to film to animation to motion graphics and back because I was afraid of not being a good enough artist. But throughout these last few projects, I've learned that you don't have to know everything to be a good artist. For me, there's no difference between being an artist or a writer, and there isn't really a clear path that runs between the two. The world somewhere between writing and art may always overwhelm me, but to be a good storyteller, I just have to keep going, despite how scared I might be. Thank you.
This was such a technical undertaking in addition to all of the artwork that you created and all of the storytelling, obviously, it sounds like you kind of enjoy learning new technical things, but can you talk about, kind of that decision to go into the thesis and be still learning new technical things and just how challenging that was to mix with getting the art and the storytelling right as well?
Sure. So motion graphics and animation don't really line up in the professional world too much. Like, motion graphics might use 2D animation as kind of a flair, and animation uses compositing in order to get the characters on the backgrounds, but there's no real kind of mix. So I'm always feeling like, oh, I have to make more motion graphics to be more professionally appealing, but in order to be accepted into the animation world, I need to have a thesis film because everybody has. So I learned all the programs that are kind of industry standard, and I just kind of panic and then try to learn everything so I can stop panicking, which fuels a lot of my creative energy. So for this, I knew I was going to use Toon Boom. We got licenses through the department so that students could use them, and so I used that. I did a continuing ed class at SVA to learn the storyboard program because it's kind of a lighter version of the animation program. And they have a lot of things listed online, like a lot of tutorials and open to the public. They're a very welcoming program, and I knew the animation theory. Every time I tried to take a class to learn something new about animation, I had already covered it from a book or something in my panicked internet searches. So like I feel like I can't just stay where I'm at technically because I need to constantly, like, I have to keep up with everybody else. Because at one point I was told, I showed my portfolio, but it wasn't even my current one. It was whatever I had at home. I showed it to a former animation guy who told me I was 4 years behind everybody getting out of animation school, and I was a senior in college. And I was like, oh my God, I have to start 4 years behind everybody else. I have to learn everything now. So that's kind of carried me through. I tried to learn as much as I could technically in fall because we were still writing and the writing process was very slow. And I had a lot of free time because this is all I did this year. Like I came to New York in September and I basically bunked down for thesis. So I learned as much as I could about the programs before I actually had to use them, and then problem solved as I went along and acted like I knew what I was doing when I didn't, and just like picked it up along the way. Thanks.
Hey, I know, I mean, all the technical stuff aside, I mean, I was really amazed, and those who haven't seen it, you can go down to the first level and watch the entire film. Or see it online at bewarethedoor.com. I guess the thing that I'd really love for you to share, and I'd really love to definitely hear again, the process of the story progression and the development that you've had from when you started up until now, and the development that you have for the final film, that was massive. So I wonder if you might be able to speak a little bit about where you started at with the interdimensional girl journey,
sure,
all the way up to much like your closing statements, you know, like the really solid character confronting her fears.
So this was based on a dream I had like 5 years ago or so that I haven't been able to nail down in any medium. And it was about a house haunted by a door and a girl getting trapped behind it, armed with like nothing but a bat or a hammer or something in her pajamas. And so it's very hard to write from dreams because they make no sense. So that was why it was very hard to put into a story. So originally, the door cost money, and it was more about an attraction thing. I wanted it to be sort of like an addiction metaphor where she moves with her mom to the house, and her mom's not paying any attention to her, and she finds this door to this crazy world where there's like half houses sticking out of the ground, like it used to be civilization, and it's not. And then she pays to go in and fights giant spiders and loves it for some reason that I never nailed down, which is why that didn't work. And goes back home, and then the door costs more money each way, and then she ends up getting trapped behind it. And I made the storyboard. It was 10 minutes long. It took a very long time. It was all going to be very scenic, admiring the world, and nonverbal because I didn't want to deal with lip sync. And I thought that would be better. So I turned it into this big thing, but then there was all the story, these questions about her stakes, her relationship with her mother, was there a father, what if the world was about him, and it just, like, so it went on, and I didn't really, it wasn't going the way I wanted it to. I wanted it to be about violence, and like addiction and stuff like that, but it wasn't working as a story. And then somebody was like, what if she's afraid of the door? Wouldn't she be afraid? That makes more sense. These spiders are like 10 feet tall or more. You can see one downstairs. And so I completely rethought the thing because I had also been wanting to make a story about bravery, like modern bravery, not just fighting giant monsters bravery. So I isolated the character list. I think I had a bigger character list, and then I made it her and her mom in the first draft of the whole thing, and then I rewrote in January. It was her and her mom moving to a new house. She didn't like the new house, or she was scared of moving to a new place, so she channeled that into like anger with her mother, and her mom just wanted her to try, and so they have this whole back and forth. And then this is added on to it, and she has to deal with both her mom not believing her, the world constantly showing up when she doesn't want it to, and then just like having to go ahead and face it just because it's there and she has to, and it has to do with like having gumption to do it rather than it making sense for her to put herself in this dangerous situation. And then everything kind of resolves as far as they kind of relate to each other more after the experience. So.
Andrea, I'm going to get on the technical accomplishment bandwagon just for a moment and just say I am in awe of what you accomplished with this. It's really quite incredible work. And you know, anybody who's seen an animated short, let alone a feature, knows the number of names that come up at the end of it. If they go to BFA animation or an MFA animation show, they'll see the number of names in the credits. I mean, this is so much work that you put in all by yourself, and I think you should be really proud of that. It's an incredible accomplishment. Setting all of that aside, which is awesome. Setting all of that aside, genre storytelling is such a powerful tool, and you wield it very, very well. Could you talk a little bit about your attraction to genre storytelling and what you think that brings to the stories you tell?
What genre is this? I have to know for marketing purposes. Can you tell me the exact phrasing?
Oh, hit me up afterwards.
I don't know exactly what genre I'm showing. I think it's somewhere between fantasy, surrealism, and sci-fi, but it just is, I don't know, everything just ends up kind of looking the way it does when I draw. I watched a lot of Courage the Cowardly Dog as a child, and I looked up a lot of Brett Hellquist work right before this happened when I was doing the architectural faces and stuff. He did the illustrations for a series of Unfortunate Events. So, and he did a lot of things with like angles and pushing things. So I did that for an art style, and I like balancing like lightheartedness and funny or cartoony images and just like darker themes. Like The Boiling Point was about a desperate man racked with guilt, but it was drawn fairly cartoony. The Cat Burglar doesn't necessarily resolve with the character redeeming himself. It more just kind of works out in a neutral way. But again, it's just a cartoony character telling this larger story. I don't know what genre I am. This is a hard question. But yeah, I just try to tell stories with characters resolving one way or another along the morality line. I think this is the first where she has like a redemption in a positive way. I think that's the first one I've done so far where it's like a positive at the end. But I don't know. I just try to tell stories in a way that makes sense with color and darkness.
My question is, I'm very curious to know what you're going to do next, and how you plan to, continue to do the work that you want to do, but maybe have a job in the commercial realm. I know you're submitting this work for festivals, which is fantastic. So I'm curious if you'd think that you would continue to make work like this, that's just telling your own stories from the ground up, but also maybe working commercially as well, or.
I'm interested in not drawing again till December, for one thing. But I would like to make shorter form things for a while. I think I thought about bringing The Burglar back up, maybe doing a web series. I want to continue to do animation and maybe I think 2D animation and with hand-drawn gives me a lot more freedom, whereas in After Effects it would be more about technique. I actually made The Cat Burglar while I had a job, so I know that I can balance side projects fairly well with working. I'd like to make something serialized. I like the idea of Patreon and crowdfunding and things that engage a community, and I think having a consistent character over several animations would be a way to build a community and really figure out how that world works. But in any case, I would like to continue telling stories, whether written or drawn, or no matter what I might be doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Andrea.
Thank you.